Welcome to this screencast where I'll be discussing olfaction and the transduction of smell. So by the end of this, you should be able to describe and explain the location, structure, and function of the olfactory receptors, be able to describe and explain the microanatomy of the olfactory epithelium, and then explain how smell is processed or how smell is transduced. So the transduction of smell. So here we go. So we have a medial view of the sagittal section through the nose, and you'll notice here that the olfactory receptors are in the posterior-superior part of the nasal cavity, and they are indicated in yellow here. So the fibers of the olfactory nerve actually will come down from the olfactory bulb, which is part of this olfactory tract. So this is all part of cranial nerve number 1, the olfactory nerve. And so you see that those fibers actually come through the roof of the nasal cavity there. It's actually going to come through the bone. And the bone that it comes through is the ethmoid bone, right, and specifically the cribriform plate. So when we're in class, take a look at one of the real skulls, and you can actually see the holes where those nerve fibers are going to actually come through. Now, they also will be penetrating an epithelium that lines the nasal cavity, and again, that epithelium is a mucosa. So it's a mucous membrane. So if we zoom in on that area that's boxed there a little bit, you will be able to first identify the large olfactory bulb, right, which if you zoom in actually is pardon me, is synapses between the actual receptor cells, right, the neuron of olfactory right here, which happens to be a bipolar neuron. So that bipolar neuron there is going to have its dendrites here, modified dendrites here that are penetrating through the epithelium. And so you see several supporting cells here in the pink, and then the bipolar cell with the modified dendrites is right here. Notice there's also then a layer of mucus that is going to be produced by those cells. They keep these cells nourished and moist, but they are going to be in direct contact with air and any molecules that are in the air. Right? So these modified dendrites here are also sometimes known as chemoreceptors, or they have chemoreceptors. They have chemoreceptors on their cell surface, and we'll look at that microanatomy in just a little bit here. So you'll notice that there are these receptors hooked up at this specialized dendrite here to the bipolar cell, and then the axon of that bipolar cell goes through some connective tissue, and then here are the little holes in the ethmoid bone, and the holes are called foramen. And then those neurons will synapse with other neurons in that olfactory bulb, and then the axons of those will go back and bring action potentials to the cortex of olfaction. So a little bit more about those receptors. So here we see, again, we've zoomed in on those modified dendrites, the cilia. So these are also hair cells, which we'd seen in the hearing mechanism. So in the membrane of those cilia, so here's the membrane. You have these receptors that are wedged in the membrane there, and then here is the odorant, and this is a chemical. It's a molecule. Chemical molecule. So smell is the result of chemicals or molecules with a specific shape that are going to bind to specific receptors. So you have lots of varied receptors on those modified dendrites on those hair cells that are going to be able to fit with different molecules that are out there. And depending on the molecule that binds to the receptor, you're going to set in motion when this odorant or this molecule binds with the receptor, which you see down here. That's going to set off a series of reactions that ultimately leads to the opening of an ion channel. And so ion channels open, and those ions diffuse in, and this leads to then depolarization. So again, when those molecules bind to the chemoreceptors on the membranes, that is going to trigger an action potential, which is then going to be conducted down this bipolar cell synapse here in the olfactory bulb with another neuron, which then brings the action potential back to the olfactory cortex, which is what we see here next. So again, we see a mid-sagittal section, a medial view. Right? Here are the fibers of the olfactory nerve. Right? These are actually bipolar cells. Here's the olfactory bulb, and we see synapses there, so action potentials are generated and then conducted back to two different parts of the brain here. There is a lateral olfactory area that is involved with conscious perception of smell. So you're thinking, oh, that is the smell of strawberries, or oh, that is my mom's perfume, or what have you. And then there's another pathway, olfactory areas involved with the visceral and emotional reaction to odors, and this is the medial aspect of this. So the fibers that run medially are going to be associated with emotional, right, and are very close to the amygdala area and the hippocampus, right? And then the ones that are more lateral are more the conscious perception of smell. Right? So those pathways are very short and very, very quick acting. Okay? So just a quick little bit there about the location, structure, and function of the olfactory receptors. You should be able to identify where those are, describe their location. Describe the microanatomy of the olfactory epithelium. It is a mucosal lining there, but involving supporting cells as well as those bipolar cells. And then a little bit about how smell is processed or transduced in the lateral and then medial areas of the cortex of the brain. Okay, you have any questions, bring them to class. Thanks.